Okay, so have you ever really thought about how much weather can change a story?
Hmm.
Like, really change it?
Yeah.
Like, would Frodo have even made it to Mordor in, like, a blizzard?
Right.
Would Harry Potter have fought Voldemort in, like, the pouring rain?
Yeah.
Like, weather can be a big deal, right?
It totally
It
can.
can totally change the game,
Absolutely.
especially in D&D.
Yeah, weather often gets overlooked as a tool
Right.
for setting tone and atmosphere in games.
Yeah.
And I think it's a missed opportunity
Yeah, for
because
sure.
it can influence so much
Yeah.
from combat encounters
Yeah.
to just the overall feel of a campaign.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, for example, in our last game,
Okay.
my party was traveling through this really spooky forest at night.
Uh-huh.
We're talking dense trees, barely any moonlight,
Yeah.
the whole 9 yards, right?
Right.
And then this eerie fog rolled in.
Okay.
And it was so thick you could barely see your hand in front of your face.
Oh, wow.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
It felt different.
Different how?
Like magically charged somehow.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a great example of how weather can shift from just being like background flavor
Right.
to something much more active in the game.
Totally.
You know, it can create tension, foreshadow danger,
Uh-huh.
or even challenge players in some really unexpected ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we actually found this awesome article
Oh, cool.
by Paul Bello on LitRPG Reads
Okay.
that like breaks down how to use weather effectively in D&D campaigns.
Awesome.
It's called The 8 Steps to Magical Weather.
Oh, that's a fantastic resource.
Yeah.
Paul Bello really emphasizes the importance of intentional weather design.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be random.
Right.
It should serve a purpose in your campaign world.
Exactly. The first step he talks about is defining the role of weather.
Okay.
So, like, is it just there for ambiance?
Uh-huh.
Like a light drizzle in a city scene?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be like a major obstacle for players to overcome?
Right.
Like a raging blizzard in the mountains?
Yeah, I think deciding that up front can really help you as a DM.
Right.
Use weather consistently throughout your campaign.
Yeah, for sure.
It lets you weave it into your world building and foreshadowing.
Uh-huh.
Imagine, for example, a slow, creeping drought impacting a region.
Okay.
That could lead to all sorts of social and political upheaval that the
Exactly.
players have to navigate.
Yeah.
Way beyond just a simple survival challenge.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's not just, is it rainy today? It's like, how does the weather shape the world around the players?
Exactly.
The second step in the article is distinguishing between natural and supernatural weather patterns.
That's a crucial distinction.
Right.
You want to have a mix of realistic weather, like your everyday rain or wind,
Yeah.
and then things that are clearly magical.
Okay.
But here's the key.
Yeah.
Even the magical weather should still feel connected to your world's lore and rules,
Right.
not just random chaos.
So like in a desert setting,
Yeah.
you could have a typical sandstorm,
Right.
but then also introduce sand that sinks.
Oh, that's cool.
It's clearly magical,
Yes.
but it could be tied to like a djinn or a cursed artifact,
Right.
something that makes sense within your world.
Precisely. It's about building a consistent magical ecosystem,
Okay.
not just throwing random weirdness at the players.
Gotcha.
And that ties into the third step,
Okay.
thinking of weather as a living thing
Uh-huh.
that changes over time
Right.
and impacts the world around it.
That's where things get really interesting to me.
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, there's a storm today.
Right.
It's about thinking long term.
Exactly.
What happens to a kingdom after years of drought?
Yeah.
How does a sudden volcanic eruption change the landscape
Right.
and affect the people who live there?
Those long-term changes can create incredible depth in your campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine a port city that thrived on trade,
Okay.
suddenly having its harbor freeze over due to a magical ice age.
Wow.
It forces players to think about the consequences of these events on a societal level, adding a whole new dimension to their decisions and actions.
I love that it's like the world is reacting to these events.
Yes,
Not just the players,
exactly.
but sometimes you want to bring the challenge directly to the party.
Right.
That's where step 4 comes in. Weather as a direct obstacle for the players to overcome.
Right. And this is where descriptive language is so important.
Oh, for sure.
Don't just say it's snowing.
Yeah.
Describe the biting wind that chills them to the bone, the way the snow muffles all sound,
Sure.
how every step is a struggle.
Right.
Make them feel the danger and difficulty of the situation.
That's so true.
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember as the DM
Yes,
that you need to balance challenge with fairness.
absolutely.
Give your players ways to overcome these obstacles creatively.
Right.
Maybe there's a magical item that helps them navigate the blizzard,
Uh-huh.
or a hidden cave they can find shelter in.
Absolutely. It's all about creating engaging challenges,
Yeah.
not punishing your players for something they can't control.
Yeah.
And speaking of magical items, let's move on to step 5,
Okay.
magic and mythology.
Ooh.
This is where things get really exciting.
Okay, so I have a question about this.
Yeah.
How do you, as a DM,
Mm-hmm.
make sure that these magical weather effects feel unique to your world?
It's a great question.
What are some things to avoid?
One trap to avoid is just using generic magical weather effects.
Okay.
Like whispering rain is a cool concept,
Uh-huh.
but what makes it unique to your world?
Right.
Is it tied to a specific deity? Does it reveal prophecies?
Gotcha.
Or is it the lingering echo of a powerful curse?
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's not just about the effect itself. It's about tying it to the lore and mythology of your world.
Exactly.
So instead of just storms linked to constellations,
Right.
you could have a storm that only rages when a specific constellation aligns in the sky, and the lightning strikes form the shape of a mythical beast
Cool.
from your world's legends.
Exactly. That kind of connection makes the magic feel so much more impactful
Yes.
because it has roots in something deeper. It's not just random. It's part of the fabric of the world.
I like that.
And that brings us to step 6.
Okay.
Thinking about how different cultures and factions might view and interact with the weather.
Oh, this is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
You could have sun worshippers who draw power from the summer solstice,
Right?
or desert nomads who have learned to predict and even ride sandstorms.
And that can lead to some really interesting role-playing opportunities.
Totally.
Imagine your players encountering a tribe
Okay.
whose entire society revolves around predicting and harnessing the power of sandstorms.
Wow.
That could lead to unique encounters, moral dilemmas,
Right.
or even new spells and abilities tied to that culture.
That's such a great idea. It's like each culture has its own unique relationship with the weather,
Exactly.
and that can inform how they interact with the world and with the players.
Exactly, and that can even lead to conflict.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine a group that worships a rain god
Huh.
coming into conflict with a fire-worshipping cult during a drought.
Oh, wow.
The possibilities for intrigue and tension are endless.
Okay, so we've talked about weather as a challenge, as a storytelling element, and how it shapes cultures.
Right.
But what about using it tactically?
Yeah.
Step 7 of the article is all about weather in combat.
This is an area where I think a lot of DMs can fall into a trap.
Okay.
Either overusing weather effects in every fight
Uh-huh.
or being afraid to use them at all.
Okay.
The key is to use them strategically for specific effect.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
You don't want a blizzard happening in every single fight.
Right.
But imagine a climactic battle
Okay.
where a well-placed gust of wind could knock an enemy off a cliff,
Uh-huh.
or a sudden downpour extinguishes a crucial fire skull.
Yeah,
It's about making those moments count.
precisely. And that leads us to the final step in the article,
Okay.
unforgettable weather events.
Ooh.
These are the moments that really stick with your players. Yeah.
Those epic occurrences that change the game in a major way.
Okay, give me an example, something really mind-blowing.
Imagine a shadow eclipse that blankets the land in darkness,
Okay.
allowing creatures from the underworld to cross over into the material plane.
Oh.
Or a meteor shower that imbues the land with magical energy,
Okay.
creating strange mutations and awakening long-dormant powers.
Wow. Those are some serious game changers.
Yeah.
It's like the weather itself becomes a force that reshapes the world.
Exactly.
How do you make sure these events feel truly impactful, though?
They need to be rare, for one thing.
Okay.
You don't want players thinking this happens every other week.
Right.
And they should be tied to major plot points or prophecies, something that feels like a turning point in the story.
So it's not just about creating a cool visual.
Right.
It's about making sure it fits into the narrative and has lasting consequences.
Exactly. The goal is to leave your players saying, remember that time when long after the game is over?
Yeah. That's the sign of a truly unforgettable weather event.
This has been so insightful.
Yeah.
It's clear that weather isn't just background noise in D&D.
No, it's not.
It's a powerful tool for storytelling, world building, and creating a more immersive and dynamic experience for your players.
Absolutely.
We've only scratched the surface here,
Yeah,
but I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
absolutely. And remember, these are just guidelines,
Right.
not hard and fast rules.
Of course.
The best way to find what works for you and your players
Well.
is to experiment, have fun,
Yeah.
and let your imagination run wild.
Before we move on, a huge shout out to Paul Bello and LitRPG Reads for the fantastic article that inspired this deep dive.
Yes, definitely check out their website for more great D&D content.
And for all of you listening, we want to hear from you. How have you used weather in your D&D games?
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite weather effects or encounters?
Let us know.
Let us know in the comments below.
Yes.
We'd love to hear from you guys.
You know what's fascinating about magical weather is how differently it can be portrayed depending on the genre.
Oh, absolutely. Like a storm of whispers in a grimdark fantasy setting would probably dredge up horrific secrets from the past. But in a lighter fantasy world, it could be something whimsical and intriguing.
Exactly. It all comes down to how you weave the weather into the narrative and the mythology of your world. It's not just the effect itself, it's the context that really matters.
That makes me think about how the article mentioned tying weather to specific deities or powerful beings.
That's a classic way to add depth to weather events. It suggests there's a reason behind the chaos, even if the players don't understand it at first.
Right, like maybe the players have to appease a storm god to calm the seas before they can set sail.
That kind of scenario instantly creates a dynamic interaction. The players aren't just reacting to the weather, they're engaging with the forces behind it. It raises the stakes and adds a layer of moral complexity.
It's not just about surviving a storm. It's about understanding the forces that control it and navigating the consequences of their actions.
Speaking of consequences, we were talking earlier about using weather in combat. It's an area where DMs need to be careful not to overdo it.
Yeah, you don't want every fight to be a hurricane of special effects, but a well-placed lightning strike or a sudden gust of wind can create some really memorable moments.
The key is to make sure those effects make sense within the context of the environment. You want them to feel like a natural extension of the setting, not just random dice rolls.
So if the party is fighting in a forest during a thunderstorm, it makes sense for lightning to strike a tree near them or for the rain to make the ground slippery. But if they're in a desert, a blizzard would feel completely out of place.
It's all about maintaining a sense of consistency and believability. Even when dealing with fantastical elements, you want the world to feel real and grounded.
Speaking of fantastical elements, the article also talks about these things called unforgettable weather events. What exactly are those?
These are the truly epic moments, the ones that leave a lasting impact on the players and the campaign world. They're tied to major plot points, prophecies, or even the actions of the players themselves.
So give me an example. What kind of events are we talking about here?
Imagine a shadow eclipse that plunges the land into darkness, opening portals to the underworld, or a meteor shower that imbues the land with magical energy, awakening long-dormant powers and causing strange mutations.
Wow, those are some serious world-altering events. How does a DM go about creating something like that?
It starts with thinking about the overall arc of your campaign and the major themes you want to explore, what kind of events would fit into that narrative and create those wow moments.
Like, if the campaign is about an ancient evil awakening, maybe there's a prophecy about a blood moon that heralds its return.
Exactly. You can foreshadow these events, building up anticipation, and then deliver on that promise in a way that feels satisfying and impactful.
And it's not just about watching the event unfold. The player should have a role to play in shaping the outcome.
Right. Maybe they have to perform a ritual to stop the blood moon or find a way to harness the energy from the meteor shower. It makes the event feel personal and gives the players a sense of agency.
So basically, weather can be so much more than just rain or shine in a D&D game. It's a tool that can be used to set the mood, create challenges, tell stories, and even reshape the world itself.
And that's what makes it such a versatile and powerful tool for dungeon masters.
What are some of your favorite ways to use weather in your D&D games? We've talked a lot about the theory, but I'm curious about your personal approach.
One thing I like to do is use weather to foreshadow upcoming events or to reflect the emotional state of the characters.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
For example, if the party is about to face a major challenge, I might have a storm start brewing on the horizon. Or if a character is feeling particularly gloomy, I might have a persistent drizzle follow them around.
It's a subtle way to connect the external world to the character's internal states.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything too dramatic. Sometimes just a change in the wind or a shift in the clouds can be enough to create a sense of foreboding or anticipation.
It's like the weather becomes a language that speaks to the players on an emotional level.
Another thing I like to do is use weather to create a sense of place.
Oh, you mean like how different regions have their own distinct weather patterns?
Exactly. If the party is traveling through a tropical jungle, I might have them deal with sweltering humidity and sudden downpours. But if they're exploring a frozen wasteland, They'll have to contend with biting winds and blinding blizzards.
It adds to the immersion, making the world feel more real and diverse.
And it can also lead to some interesting gameplay challenges. If the party's used to fighting in open terrain, they might have to adjust their tactics when they're suddenly faced with a dense fog or a torrential downpour.
Yeah, that reminds me of that fog encounter we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It really threw our party off guard.
That's what I love about using weather. It keeps the players on their toes, forces them to think creatively and adapt to new situations.
So we've talked about using weather to foreshadow events, reflect emotions, and create a sense of place. What about using it to introduce new creatures or monsters?
That's a fantastic idea. You could have certain monsters that are only found during specific weather conditions, like lightning elementals that appear during thunderstorms or ice wraiths that haunt blizzards.
It adds a layer of danger to the environment and gives players a reason to be even more wary of the elements.
It also opens up possibilities for creative monster designs and abilities. Imagine a creature that can control the wind, summoning gusts to knock enemies off their feet, or creating whirlwinds to shield itself from attacks.
Or a monster that can camouflage itself in the snow, blending in with the blizzard until it's too late for the players to react.
Those are great examples. It shows how weather can create a sense of mystery and wonder.
So far, we've covered a lot of ground when it comes to using weather. Is there anything else we've missed?
Well, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is using weather to create memorable set pieces for important scenes.
Oh, I like that. Tell me more.
Imagine a climactic battle taking place during a raging thunderstorm, with lightning illuminating the battlefield and the wind whipping the characters' cloaks around them.
That's so cinematic, it adds a whole other level of drama to the scene.
And it doesn't have to be a combat encounter. You could use weather to create a romantic scene with two characters sharing a kiss under a starry sky or dancing in the rain. Or you could use it to create a moment of awe and wonder with the party witnessing a spectacular aurora borealis or a double rainbow.
It's about using the weather to enhance the emotional impact of the scene.
And don't forget about the smaller details. Sometimes just a few well-placed descriptions can make a big difference.
You mean like sensory details?
Yes, instead of just saying it's raining, describe the sound of the raindrops pattering on the leaves or the feeling of the cold wind whipping through the character's hair.
Those details really help to bring the scene to life.
It's about making the players feel like they're truly immersed in the world you've created.
So we've talked about using weather to foreshadow events, reflect emotions, create a sense of place, introduce new creatures, and enhance important scenes. What else? Is there any other cool ways to use weather in D&D?
Well, one thing we haven't touched on is using weather to create puzzles or challenges that require the players to use their wits and creativity.
Oh, I like that. Give me an example.
Imagine a dungeon where the rooms are constantly shifting and changing due to magical weather patterns. The players might have to figure out how to use a gust of wind to propel themselves across a chasm, or how to time their movements to avoid being struck by lightning.
It adds a physical and mental challenge to the game.
Exactly. And it encourages players to think outside the box and come up with creative solutions.
It's not just about fighting monsters, it's about interacting with the environment in a meaningful way.
Another idea is to use weather as a form of communication or storytelling.
How would that work?
You could have ancient prophecies that are revealed through specific weather patterns or spirits that communicate through the wind or rain.
That's a cool way to add a layer of mystery and intrigue to the game.
It also allows you to introduce information or clues in a subtle and engaging way.
Instead of just handing the players a note, you're giving them a puzzle to solve.
Exactly, and it makes the world feel more alive and responsive to the player's actions.
So basically, the possibilities are endless when it comes to using weather in D&D.
The key is to think creatively and to use it in a way that saves your story and enhances the player experience.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the basic principles of weather design to some really creative and unconventional ideas.
And I hope we've inspired our listeners to think about weather in new and exciting ways.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to remind everyone that these are just suggestions, not hard and fast rules.
The beauty of D&D is that you can adapt and modify these ideas to fit your own unique style and campaign setting.
Don't be afraid to experiment and see what works best for you and your players.
The most important thing is to have fun and to create a memorable gaming experience.
Okay, let's move on to the next part of our discussion, where we'll delve into some specific examples of how to implement these weather ideas and talk about some of the challenges and rewards of using weather in your games.
You know, we've talked a lot about specific weather events and how to use them, but I think it's also worth considering the impact of seasons on a D&D world.
Oh, that's a great point. It's not just about what the weather is like on a given day, it's about how those patterns change over time.
Exactly. Think about how different seasons could affect the environment, the creatures that inhabit it, even the cultures of different societies.
Like in a world with harsh winters,
Yeah.
people would have to adapt their entire way of life. They'd need different clothing, maybe even unique architectural styles to survive the cold.
Absolutely. And those adaptations could create fascinating opportunities for world building and role playing. Imagine encountering a nomadic tribe that follows the migration patterns of giant woolly mammoths, relying on them for food and shelter during the winter months.
That's such a vivid image. It's like the seasons themselves become characters in the story.
And don't forget about the potential for adventure. Maybe there's a hidden temple that's only accessible during the spring thaw when a particular river floods its banks.
Or a legendary beast that only emerges from hibernation during the summer solstice.
Exactly. The changing seasons can create a sense of dynamism and unpredictability in your world.
And it's not just about the natural world either. Think about how seasons could affect things like trade routes, warfare,
Yeah.
even political intrigue.
A kingdom that relies on naval power might be vulnerable during the winter when its harbors freeze over.
Or a cunning ruler might choose to launch an attack during the harvest season when their enemies are preoccupied with gathering crops.
It adds a whole new layer of strategic depth to the game.
And it can create some interesting moral dilemmas for the players.
Hmm.
Do they help defend a city that's under attack during a blizzard, even if it means risking their own lives?
Or do they prioritize the needs of their own community, even if it means turning away refugees fleeing a war-torn region during a harsh winter?
It's those kinds of tough choices that make D&D so compelling.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about how holidays and festivals can add flavor to a D&D world.
Oh, I love that idea. Holidays are such a rich part of any culture, and they can really bring a world to life.
Think about the real world and how different cultures celebrate different holidays. You can draw inspiration from those traditions and adapt them to your fantasy setting.
So you might have a harvest festival in a farming community with feasting, dancing, and maybe even a friendly competition to see who can grow the biggest pumpkin.
Exactly. Or you might have a winter solstice celebration in a more northern culture with bonfires, ice sculptures, and rituals to honor the spirits of the season.
It's a great way to introduce players to the unique customs and beliefs of different cultures.
And those celebrations can also provide opportunities for adventure. Maybe the players have to stop a group of bandits from disrupting the festivities or uncover a conspiracy to sabotage the annual harvest competition.
Or maybe they're tasked with retrieving a stolen relic that's essential to a particular ritual.
The possibilities are endless.
And it's not just about big public events. Sometimes the smaller, more personal holidays can be just as meaningful.
Imagine a character who has a special tradition they follow on the anniversary of a loved one's death, or a family that gathers every year to tell stories and share memories.
It adds a layer of depth and emotional resonance to the characters.
And it reminds us that even in a world of magic and monsters, the things that connect us as human beings are still important.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything we can think of when it comes to using weather and calendar events in D&D. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think the most important thing is to remember that these elements are tools. And like any tool, they can be used in countless ways. There's no right or wrong way to incorporate them into your campaigns. The key is to be creative, have fun, and tell a great story.
Beautifully said. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of weather and calendar events in D&D, and we hope we've inspired you to think about these elements in new and exciting ways.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you as always.
A huge shout out to LitRPG Reads and author Paul Bello for the amazing article that inspired this deep dive. Be sure to check out their website for more great D&D content.
And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Share your favorite ways to use weather and calendar events in your D&D games in the comments below.
Until next time, keep rolling those dice, and may your adventures be filled with exciting weather and memorable moments.